And lastly, let's look at another series of games that I picked up after Monster Hunter and I still playing to this day, and that is the Souls series. Basically Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, Sekiro, and then currently Elden Ring. And all of these titles come from the same developer called From Software, and they are notoriously famous for creating super hard games. A lot of gamers describe the Dark Souls series as a self-torture, right? Because the entire series is designed very unfriendly and the developer goes out of the way to get you in the game. And that's precisely why I totally love this entire series of games, because when I do beat it, I feel like I have legitimately solved the hard puzzle the developer has put in front of me, and I've beaten their intellect. Part of the hardship of playing Dark Souls is fighting the bosses, and the bosses, just like Monster Hunter World, is basically a huge ass monster or human droid that has a variety of moves and combos that in the beginning you know nothing about, and through keep dying and failing, you start to learn the kind of pattern the boss have, what move he does after what, and then learn the timing of how you can avoid each move, whether you roll, or you roll, wait a second, roll again, and eventually you construct an entire mental picture of exactly what the boss can do and during which opening moment can you safely attack them. Because if you attack in the wrong moment, the boss will just hit you before you can recover from your swing. And that's actually a very realistic thing. Although in reality, the recovery frame, so to speak, the time that you take to recover from a strike is far less than in a game, but it is actually still a thing. Right? There are times where you throw a punch, especially a heavy hitting punch, and there's a brief moment where you have to recover and put your hand back. And a very skilled fighter can actually catch a person right after he throws a heavy hit and then hitting them when they are defenseless. So as you can see, there are actually similarities between understanding how to fight a boss in Dark Souls versus how to fight somebody in reality, although the time frame recovery is vastly different in actual timing. Another thing is that fighters also have a pattern and a pace. As is one famous saying, that our strongest instinct is not the instincts of survival, but the instincts of doing what is familiar. So every fighter, although I would say the good fighters, their patterns are less visible and harder to grasp, but every fighter, as long as you're a human, you have a pattern. And learning somebody's pattern will give you a huge advantage over them when you are actually fighting. Of course, there is the issue that if you do meet somebody for the first time in a self-defense situation, in the street, you don't know their pattern beforehand, right? This is different to if you fight in a tournament, especially the professional tournament where they can see past fight footage of the fighters they're gonna fight. So in those situations, analyzing pattern and trying to find the weakness, those are very, very important. But when you fight on the street, you don't have the pre-record of what that person is likely to do. But still, unless you beat them on your first hit, you can still very quickly, during the first few seconds of a fight, get a rough idea of what type of motion the person likes to do. So although it doesn't help tremendously, learning to read someone's pattern fast can still give you some benefit even in a self-defense situation. And of course, rhythm, right? In games like Dark Souls and Monster Hunter, the monster has a rhythm. For example, they will attack 1, 2, wait, and then 3, wait, and then 4, 5, for example. Or 1, 2, 3, wait, then 4, 5. So there are different combos with different patterns, with different rhythms. Real people do that too, right? I mean, obviously the most rudimentary is you come up, you do, a jab, cross, hook, and uppercuts, pa, 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 pa. But, as fighters get more skilled, they'll start mixing up the patterns. They'll be like pa, pa, and then wait, and then they will sidestep, and then pa, pa, pa. For example, so the pattern can change as well. Being able to pace somebody else's rhythm can also give you an advantage, which is why high-skilled fighters, they can kind of find rhythm from the person's step work and from the way they swing punches, and then be able to catch them off beat, right? And you might have also heard of this thing where professional fighters, they have their own rhythm and beat, and their goal is to disrupt other person's beat and make them follow their own beat. And once that happens, then they have the upper hand in this fight. So all of these things do exist in reality in fighting, and they can also exist in playing these games. Again, I'll stress, just because you play a Dark Souls game doesn't mean you suddenly know how to fight. It doesn't work like that. But if you can do both, you do spend time training and sparring and fighting, and you also play the game, then it kind of help you to reflect upon what you do in each, and they can actually help each other both improve. Lastly, another very interesting thing was this Dark Souls game is a gaming mechanic called parry. Basically, if you press the button just at the right moment when the boss attack is about to land, then you basically deflect the attack, and the boss's stance breaks, and for a moment it's vulnerable where you can go in and do what they call a riposte, which is like a critical heavy hit that deals a lot of damage, more damage than you regularly do from swinging your weapon around. So this mechanic in Dark Souls and Elden Ring is a very rewarding mechanic because firstly, you can render the boss's heavy attack completely useless if you get the right timing. Secondly, the boss is vulnerable for a moment where it can't hit you back risk-free. And lastly, you do more damage in one riposte than you otherwise would swinging your weapon with regular attack. Now, while this does not directly help you with martial arts, what's interesting is that this kind of approach is almost identical to how majority of the internal martial arts styles actually approaches combat. So you can see here's a clip of me fighting one of the supposedly hardest bosses fight in the new game Elden Ring, and I pretty much beat both bosses with mostly parry and riposte. And you can see that I'm basically standing in front of the boss and not moving. I'm just waiting for the boss to do his hit, and as he does his hit, I time my parry precisely, make the boss break his stance, and then I go in for the riposte. So how is this almost identical to internal martial arts? Well, if you have watched my videos on my first meeting with my Tongbei master, you will know that he was standing in front of me, both hands on the side of his legs, very casually, not doing anything, just waiting for me to make the move. And the moment I went in and make the move, then he suddenly caught my punch with his arm going downwards motion called P. And that P was so heavy and hard that I was literally in shock. I had pain going right through my bones, and the shock numbness that went all the way up to my neck, and my head was blank for a brief moment. My body was also tilted to the side. At that very moment, he placed his other hand right on my face. He didn't hit me, but he placed on my face, and the hand I used for the P was also placed as a fist on my ribs. So that experience I had at that very moment is pretty much a stance break, right? It's basically you lost your balance, you lost your bearing, you lost your orientation, and you are vulnerable for the picking. And my Tongbei master was patiently waiting for me to make that move and caught my move halfway flawlessly at the moment that causes me complete vulnerability. And that's precisely the reason why I basically like parry and riposte in Dark Souls games so much, and I only use these mechanics as long as the boss is parryable, right? There are bosses that you can't parry, that have to fight in other tactics, but every boss that's parryable, I always make sure I learn the correct parry timing and beat them that way, because in playing it this way, it reinforces and reminds me of my real life combat approach taught to me by my Wuxing Tongbei master. I do have quite a number of videos where I explain the internal martial arts combat approach, how they engage, break structure, cause unbalance, and then deliver the fight ending strikes. So feel free to check those videos out. And while doing parry and riposte in the game doesn't exactly help me pee on somebody's arm in real life, practically speaking, but it does also help me with my mental fortitude, right? Because as you may know, inexperienced fighters, they fidget a lot when they are facing an opponent. That is a sign of lacking self-confidence. The more confident a fighter is, the more calm he is and the less he fidgets, right? If you're unsure of yourself, then you always kind of, your feet are kind of shifting around, you're not sure what kind of distance is ideal, you know where you should put your hand, and you kind of debate whether you should throw a punch or defend first. Like everything is uncertain. And the same with this game, right? If you are unsure of your parrying timing and skill, then it's very difficult for a person to stand in front of a boss without holding up a shield and just waiting for the hit to come. That kind of takes a certain amount of mental fortitude to be able to face that situation and know that you can catch that strike with the correct parry timing. So that kind of mentality is almost identical to a real fight. And as the game's fight progresses, you might be down to your last potion or no potion, your health might be really low, and up to which point, almost every player will start to panic, myself included. When you panic, or when the boss health is low, you're almost gonna win, you tend to be nervous and start panicking. And then it will cause you to miss your parry timing. Even though you had it all down by the books, you know exactly the right timing. But when a lot is on the line, right? If you just hit him one more time, you're gonna win this fight that you struggled for an hour on. Or that if the boss hits you and you miss the parry, you're gonna die. Then when so much is actually weighing on the outcome of that parry, then almost all the players, they will start to mess up the timing, a time that they should already have right down in the books. They'll start messing up. That's exactly how it is in reality as well, right? When there's a lot riding on the line for you to win the fight, then more often than not, you will start dropping the balls and making mistakes. Which is why in Chinese martial arts, there's always been a saying where you need to have a regular heart, 平常心. So 平常心literally translates to a regular heart, but in this case, it's more like a normal mentality. You have to train yourself to not have an elevated heart rate, to not feel panic attack, to not feel stress, to not literally feel anything when you are fighting a random person trying to hurt you. Only then will you be able to ensure to perform at the best of what you have trained on a regular basis. Any type of mental stress, panic, nerve breakdown will greatly hinder your performance. So if your regular training, let's say, is a 7 out of 10, if your mentality is not calm, you only perform a 2 or 3 out of 10, which is a lot worse than what you otherwise could do when stress-free. So that kind of experience players go through identically when they're playing through a very hard game such as Dark Souls, Monster Hunter, StarCraft, or Elden Ring. And again, while playing a game doesn't automatically teach you to have to be stress-free and panic-free in a fight, but it does give you more opportunity to examine, reflect upon yourself and understand why you are panicking, how you are panicking, how you can deal with that feeling, have it happen in you, but completely ignore it and not let it affect you. So that's the type of training. Of course, if you do fight every day, that's great, but for a lot of people out there, myself included, that's not possible. And therefore, playing a hard game is a pretty good substitute. And of course, I'm not saying playing games is the only way. I'm sure there are other sports out there or hobbies that can also act as the same type of substitution. But playing hard games like Monster Hunter and Dark Souls and Elden Ring is one of the pretty good substitutes that I have personally came across. And just for example, last year there was a person who jumped into my yard trying to steal stuff. So my mom saw that person through the kitchen window and called me out during my training in the lounge. So I came out to the person. And that person, when he saw that I came out, he didn't even run away, right? He was like, and that really upsets me. So if I went out and the guy ran away, at least that means he has fear of the owner of this property, and therefore, it discourages him from coming back because he knows that we have people living here. But the guy was not running away. He didn't show any sign of fear, and that really upset me. And it is a big problem because if I don't do something, he's gonna think that it's okay to jump into my property and try to steal things. Even if he gets discovered, nothing happens. Which is why, while he was trying to explain to me that no, he's just here to look for something, I went up to him and I punched him right in the face without saying anything to him. And while he faces dazed, I gave him a low kick to the knee, like the Muay Thai type of kick to the side of the knee. And he started crippling, and then he started turning around and started running out. So the main reason I did that is to basically show him that it's not okay to jump into my yard and there are consequences. The point I'm trying to get to is that through the whole process, and even till afterwards, I realized that my heart didn't elevate its heart rate at all, and I didn't feel any type of nervousness or panic or stress. That whole thing was just a regular, everyday occurrence to me, even though I don't punch people in my yard every day, right? You can take my word on that. but the way my body reacted is just like this thing happens all the time and it's no big deal. Of course, that is largely attributed to the fact that I do have extensive fighting experience, whether it's on the street, self-defense, punching thieves, or challenging people when I go back to China. So I do have a fairly extensive experience when it comes to fighting. But since the pandemic, I haven't really fought anyone because I've been stuck at home, self-isolated. Occasionally I make videos with my friend Eric, but I don't actually see that many people. So I haven't actually been fighting anyone for the past 2 years since pandemic started. The reason that I will still be able to maintain this kind of calm mentality, partially because of, decade long of building up this kind of experience, but also I believe that playing these hard games further helped me to upkeep this type of calm psychic and mentality. Another potential benefit that one could gain from playing games is the lesson of trusting your training and not your instinct. There are many times when I'm playing Monster Hunter or Dark Souls, Elden Ring, where I already understood the boss's pattern. I know at some point I shouldn't be doing that extra attack, but due to our inherent behavior and the instinct of greed or whatever other flaws that we have as humans, I tend to hit the boss one extra time too many, or do something that I knew I shouldn't do, and in doing so get punished by the boss and get killed and lose that fight and have to restart all over again. And the same thing can be observed when you are training and learning how to fight. In fact, for most untrained or unexperienced fighters, almost all the instinctive actions that we do are counterproductive. For example, when we get hit in the face, we automatically want to take our face away from the punches, and in doing so, compromises our vision, reaction, and structure. Or when you get tired, you want to drop your hand, and when you drop your hand, you get knocked out, shot into your head. Or even when you are on the ground, when someone's ground and pounding you in the face, a lot of untrained people tend to want to turn around and give their back to the opponent, which will then end up in a rear naked choke.
In the intricacies of grappling, Royce is taking the time to study the situation and ride the opponent.
So these are just a few examples of all the things that you instinctively want to do, but that will actually make the situation much worse for you in a fight. Which is why when I'm playing these games like Monster Hunter and Dark Souls, I come up with the exact plan on how to fight this boss, when to roll, when to hit, when to parry, and I stick to that plan, and anytime my inside voice wants me to do something out of that plan, I completely ignore it. I follow the plan and ignore my inner voice. And the same thing can be applied to martial art training and learning how to fight, is to trust your training. Whatever your training tells you to do, you do exactly that, even when the time you instinctively feel that whatever your training is telling you to do is dangerous or wrong, you have to trust that, because you need to realize the whole reason you go to training is to do something that you don't inherently have a habit of doing. So if you keep trusting your own inherent habit and not the training, you actually never get better. So some of you now might think, okay, but what about stories about fighters having a superior instinct and making the correct decision on the fly? Okay, so that is reserved for very, very experienced fighters. So unless you're one of those super experienced fighters who've been to over hundreds of fights, you won't have that instinct that actually make better decisions than your training does. So for most of you watching my video, that should not be your concern at all. Your default instinct is definitely worse than the training that you should receive from a proper teacher. Only when you accumulated hundreds of fighting experiences can you then develop an instinct that might actually be better than the training habits that you have formed throughout the years. I often tell people when they ask me why do you waste time playing games, that playing games actually is a way for me to have a mirror to see myself. I see all my flaws and weaknesses while I play a game. Sometimes I know this boss has this pattern, but my hand just refuses to react the same way because I have the wrong habit, at which point I have to purposely correct my incorrect habit. The same thing happens all the time in training. When I realize I have the wrong habit, I have to correct it as soon as possible. But if you don't have this habit of constantly monitoring yourself and seeing your mistakes, then you're never going to be able to improve drastically in your training. Another thing that I picked up both on training and playing games is that whenever you fail something, find the root of that failure in yourself. I know people who play a game, lose it to a boss or to whatever mechanic, and then blame the game, like, why the developer is like this. In fact, that very hard dual boss in Elden Ring, a lot of people blame the developer for introducing a hard boss and saying whoever invented that boss should be fired from the company. That's a very bad approach to problem solving, blaming others for something that you have failed to do. My masters had always told me that if you lost a fight, blame no one but yourself and ask yourself, how can you learn from this and get better? And that's the same approach I take when playing a difficult game. If I fight a boss and something happens and I got killed, I will ask myself, why did I get killed? Not why this boss did this to me at that time where I couldn't roll or I couldn't avoid the attack. Why the developer designed such an annoying boss? I never say those things. I just say, how can I get better and how can I improve my gameplay to beat that boss and to beat whatever the developer has designed intentionally to be super hard. And for me, that is a very positive and healthy mentality. And in doing this repeatedly, it made me see myself a lot more clearer and see all the flaws in my personality and how in the beginning I want to blame somebody else, an external source of my failures. And I refuse to change my habit even though I consciously know what I did there will get myself killed. And most importantly, to know my most vulnerable moment when I'm having anxiety or being nervous during a stressful situation. You never truly know yourself until you've put yourself under severe stress and stop being able to look into yourself and reflect what you are going through. Of course, gaming isn't the only way to experience such. There are many other things that you can do, but for a lot of you out there, gaming is one of the better ways to go through this experience rather than getting held at gunpoint or join a gang or face a life and death situation. Those are not very practical and you can't just go out and sign up to that kind of experience, but playing game is a healthy alternative. Once again, I'm not saying everyone who trains Chinese martial arts should be playing games. What I'm saying is, if you have the right mindset and you know what you are getting out of a game, then playing game could very well help you improve martial art training indirectly. And this isn't limited to just gaming, but to a lot of things in life. If you can see the same type of value and quality that you are trying to get through martial art training, if you can see that same kind of quality in other things you do, then you will notice that your personal training will improve at a much rapid pace than if you only think about training during training or when you go to a class. Alright, I hope this video had made sense to you and is interesting. If it is, please do consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. And if you want to support me on Patreon, that would be greatly appreciated. I do have a huge variety of Patreon-only videos that covers things that I don't talk in public, especially the more in-depth understanding and analysis of the 4 fundamental forces, which can be used to explain any internal martial arts mechanics. As always, I'll give a shout out to all my Patreon supporters. Thank you guys so much for supporting me. Especially during the pandemic, your support is very much appreciated. And a special thank you to my new Patreon supporter, James Deltry. I hope I didn't butcher your surname. And as I've already messaged you, all my Patreon supporters feel free to message me at any time for any questions on current content or suggestions for future content, or just any question on martial art in general. If I know the answer, I'll help you. If I don't, I'll find them out for you. I do have extensive connection to all kind of masters with all kind of styles abroad and in China. And as you might notice from my last video, I also do sometimes make exclusive videos for my Patreon supporters' questions when the question is too complex to be answered with text. So I do try to help my Patreon supporters in any way I could possibly when it comes to Chinese martial arts. Lastly, I'd like to remind everyone we're still in the pandemic, so keep your social distance, sanitize your hands, wear your mask, stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for watching TriEssence Martial Art channel, and I'll see you next time.